The day the earth shook. War rarely announces itself, but on one cold morning in 1944, the Germans did. At dawn, a thunderous roar rolled across the fields, the unmistakable sound of a coordinated German counterattack. Mortars shrieked overhead, artillery pounded the earth, machine guns, MG-42s, opened up from hidden fortifications like 1,000 tearing saws. A British company, under strength, exhausted, low on ammunition, found itself caught in a storm designed to annihilate them. And at the center of this disaster, 5 German bunkers stood like concrete giants, unmoving, untouchable, deadly. They would become the tombstones of the British line, unless someone did the impossible. The attack began before anyone even reached for breakfast. A deafening thoom shattered the morning quiet, then another, and another. Shells fell like rain, mud blasted into the air, shrapnel screamed past helmets, trenches collapsed in clouds of dirt and smoke, men scrambled for cover, radios crackled with panic. Harker dove behind a shattered wall as debris slammed into the ground beside him. Private Lewis, "It's an entire company! They're pushing hard!" Corporal Haynes, "They're trying to break through us! Hold the line!" But it wasn't the infantry assault that terrified them. It was what came next. The 5 bunkers awaken. As the bombardment eased, a new sound echoed across the valley. Brrrr! The sound of 5 MG-42s opening fire. From 5 bunkers, with interlocking arcs of fire, they stitched the ground with lines of bullets so dense the air itself seemed carved apart. British soldiers who attempted to move even a few inches were joining the army. Just another name. When the war began, Harker enlisted like many young men. Not out of glory, not out of adventure, but out of a sense of duty. The British Army saw him as just another private, a body, a rifle, a uniform. Nobody imagined that this quiet, wiry mechanic would one day build a weapon that changed the fate of an entire company. At first, he served in a standard infantry role, but his skills quickly became known. Rifles repaired under fire, trucks patched together with wire and cloth, broken equipment fixed with scrap metal. Yet even then, Harker was thinking bigger, because at the front he saw something every soldier feared: German bunkers. Enemy fortifications, the unbreakable wall. Bunkers were more than concrete, they were psychological weapons. Hidden MG-42 nests could spit out 1,200 rounds per minute. The sound alone froze men in their tracks. Mortar crews inside reinforced chambers were nearly impossible to reach. Every attempt to advance meant crawling through mud, being pinned down, lying face first in the dirt while bullets cracked overhead, watching friends fall, waiting for a miracle that never came. Harker saw platoons evaporate in seconds. He saw entire assaults fail not because of poor planning, but because no one could get close enough to throw a grenade or set a charge. And night after night, the same question echoed in his mind. Why don't we have something to burn them out? The idea that wouldn't die. Flamethrowers existed. The British Army had some, but not enough. And none were assigned to his unit. They were rare, dangerous, slow to deploy, and reserved for specialized teams. So Harker, standing in the ruins of another failed assault, looked at the twisted metal around him and whispered, "I could build one." His friends laughed. "A flamethrower? Out of what? Your mess tin and some duct tape?" But he wasn't joking, not even a little. Because in his mind he saw it clearly. Fuel tank, hose, pump, ignition. Simple, crude, deadly. Exactly what they needed. Scavenging the impossible. The next morning, Harker began gathering what he needed. From broken trucks, abandoned fuel drums, damaged petrol cans, destroyed generators, he scavenged a pair of small cylindrical tanks, a length of flexible hose, an old hand pump, valves from a broken water system, and a spark plug from a ruined engine. Piece by piece, he assembled his dream. His comrades watched with disbelief, amusement, and eventually awe. Testing the monster. Behind the lines, Harker's creation roared to life. A stream of fire, raw, uncontrolled, 2 meters long at first, then 3 meters, then 5. His friends backed away. One muttered, "Bloody hell, he's actually built it." Another said, "This thing could clear a bunker." But word traveled fast, too fast, and the officers were not impressed. The first ban. When command discovered what Harker had built, they were horrified. A lieutenant stormed into the workshop. "Get rid of it, immediately. This is not Army-approved equipment." They listed the reasons. Too dangerous, too unstable, unregulated fuel pressure, no safety valves, no training manuals. Harker tried to protest. He said it worked. He said it could save lives. They didn't care. The order was final. Destroy it. But Harker didn't destroy it. He hid it. Because deep in his heart, he knew one day they would need it. One day when the official equipment failed, the Army would need something born from desperation. He wasn't wrong. That moment came far sooner than anyone expected. The landscape of hell. Europe in 1944 was not a battlefield, it was a graveyard. Fields once green, now churned into black mud. Villages flattened into broken teeth. Roads carved into trenches. And everywhere, the cold, unblinking eyes of German concrete bunkers. British soldiers quickly learned that German fortifications were more than obstacles. They were predators. Each bunker a steel jaw. Each machine gun a throat of fire. Every approach road, field or hill, a killing ground. To fight here was to move from cover to cover, praying you were not already in the sights of a weapon you couldn't see. The German defense doctrine was terrifyingly efficient. Interlocking fields of fire, concealed apertures barely visible even from a few meters away. MG-42s that fired so fast the bullets sounded like tearing cloth. Mortars inside fortified chambers. Snipers hidden behind armored shutters. The British Army had courage. They had rifles. They had Bren guns, Lee Enfields, grenades. But none of it mattered when the enemy was inside 6 feet of reinforced concrete. A single MG-42 bunker could stall an entire company. 2 bunkers could destroy it. Harker saw this daily. Men he laughed with at breakfast were crawling through mud by noon and gone by dusk. He watched squads vanish trying to charge a bunker. He saw engineers die trying to set explosives. He saw officers torn apart in the first seconds of an advance. And he heard the same whispered question again and again, always under breath. Why don't we have something stronger? The problem with British equipment. The Piat, a clumsy spring-loaded anti-tank launcher that often misfired or failed to penetrate thick concrete. Bangalore torpedoes, effective but required soldiers to crawl directly up to the bunker's front door, usually suicide. Grenades, only useful if you somehow reach the opening, alive. None of these tools were fast,
none were safe, and none were effective against deeply entrenched German strongpoints, especially when the Germans reinforced their bunkers with double-thick concrete, angled entrances, internal blast walls, and overlapping firing arcs. The British Army wasn't lacking bravery, it was lacking fire. Real fire. Heat that could reach into a bunker, bend around corners, and force men out or neutralize them instantly. Harker realized what the officers didn't. Conventional weapons were not enough for unconventional fortifications. Harker wasn't a man easily shaken, but he still remembered the sound of one particular attack. A platoon ordered forward across a shallow slope toward a triangular complex of 3 German bunkers. The officer's whistle blew, the men ran, and then, rat-a-tat-tat-tat, the air shredded. Bodies dropped, men screamed, the survivors froze behind a fallen tree that offered no cover. Harker crawled to a wounded friend, pressing a cloth to his chest, whispering lies. "You'll be fine, mate. Just breathe. Help is coming." But it wasn't. No medic could reach them. No artillery could silence the bunkers. No strategy could bypass them. Harker saw this too often. Too many friends bleeding into the soil because their army lacked a tool that even the Germans had deployed since 1940. Portable flamethrowers. He wasn't angry at the officers. He wasn't angry at the doctrine. He was angry at the problem. A problem he knew he could solve.
The spark of an idea. The idea didn't hit him all at once. It came in pieces. He saw the fuel lines of a burned-out British truck and thought, hose. He saw a cracked generator and thought, pump. He saw a discarded spark plug and thought, ignition. He saw men burned by exploding shells and thought, fire is fear. And then the idea crystallized. What if he created a personal bunker clearing weapon? Cheap, portable, brutal, and devastating. He wasn't thinking about glory. He wasn't thinking about awards. He was thinking about something else entirely. If I can save even one friend, it's worth the risk. Why innovation was forbidden. Innovation at the front was dangerous, not because it might fail, but because it broke the chain of command. Officers feared untested weapons, accidental explosions, loss of control. Soldiers improvising without approval. The British Army in World War II was a machine, rigid, procedural, disciplined. If every soldier built their own weapon, chaos would follow. But Harker wasn't thinking like a soldier. He was thinking like a man shoved between survival and annihilation. And he knew, if the army won't make the weapon we need, then I will. With that thought, Chapter 2 closes, and the real story begins.
Innovation in war does not come from laboratories. It comes from fear, desperation, necessity. And what Private William Harker felt that cold morning in France was not brilliance, but the simple realization, if I don't build something new, more of us will die. Behind the lines, inside a battered barn-turned-field workshop, Harker stared at a pile of junk scavenged from dead trucks and shattered equipment. To anyone else, it was garbage. To him, it was a toolkit, a blueprint, a lifeline. He was about to build a weapon no one asked for, and everyone would soon need. Fuel tanks. He found 2 dented cylindrical tanks from a burned-out Bren carrier. They were charred but intact. A hose, the remains of a fuel line from an abandoned Bedford truck, rubber stiffened by the cold but usable. A pump, a hand-operated industrial pump from a broken water filtration unit, clogged with mud, easily cleaned. Ignition source, a spark plug from a vehicle destroyed by artillery, the wiring still attached. Valves and clamps, taken from a ruined generator and a shattered flamethrower fuel drum. Little by little, scrap became components. Components became a design, and the design became a weapon. His friends watched silently. Some were excited, some terrified. Some thought he had lost his mind. Harker ignored them all. He had a vision in his head, a stream of fire capable of crawling into bunker openings, flooding the interior with flame and smoke, breaking the German psychological advantage. He cleared a table and took out a notebook. No fancy engineering, just rough sketches and instinct. His plan was simple. Pressurize fuel manually with the hand pump. Force mixture through the hose. Ignite fuel at nozzle using a spark plug wired to a battery. Spray fire 10 to 15 feet. It didn't need to look good. It didn't need to be safe. It didn't need to be efficient. It needed to work. Even soldiers who mocked him now stood behind him, nodding silently, as they realized he might actually pull this off.
Construction begins. Harker hammered dents out of the fuel tanks, welded brackets using scavenged metal plates, soldered copper tubing into the pump line, bolted the tanks into a crude backpack frame, wrapped the hose in cloth for insulation, fitted the spark plug at the nozzle tip, taped wiring to a dry cell battery. The soldiers around him took shifts. One fetched tools. One stood watch for officers. One helped hold tanks in place. One tested the pump mechanism. And all of them prayed the thing wouldn't explode. During meals, they whispered, "When he fires it, will it work? Or kill him instantly? Or take out all of us?" Harker kept working, focused, calm, driven by a purpose bigger than fear. On a foggy afternoon, Harker stepped behind the workshop. A few soldiers followed him, nervous and excited. He strapped the crude metal rig to his back. The tanks clanked. The straps creaked. It weighed nearly 70 pounds. He gripped the nozzle with both hands. His heartbeat pounded through his gloves. One friend held a fire extinguisher. Another held a blanket. Everyone held their breath. Harker pumped the handle once, twice, 5 times. The hose stiffened. Fuel pressure climbed. He pressed the ignition switch. Click. Nothing. He pressed it again. Whoom! A blast of fire erupted. Not a gentle flame, a living, roaring jet of yellow heat 3 meters long. Soldiers stumbled backward, yelling, "Jesus Christ! Bloody hell! It actually works!" The barn walls reflected firelight as Harker adjusted pressure, increasing the flame's size until it burned 6 meters long. For the first time, he allowed himself to smile. Not out of pride, but relief. He had built a weapon that could change everything. 3 British officers, stiff uniforms, cold eyes. They had heard the commotion, they had seen the flames, and they were furious. Captain, shouting, "What in God's name is this contraption?" Harker stood at attention, silent. The captain circled the flamethrower like it was a demon summoned from hell. He jabbed a finger at it. "This is unauthorized. This is dangerous. This is against every regulation we have. You will destroy it immediately." But the men behind Harker did not speak. Their silence was a statement. We need this. We need this, even if the officers do not understand. The captain glared at them, then ordered, "Remove it from service, now." But Harker wasn't done. Not even close.
Hiding the flamethrower. Soldiers waited for the officers to leave. Then they surrounded Harker. "We're not letting you scrap it. We'll hide it. One day we'll need it." They covered the weapon with canvas, shoved it under crates, piled sandbags in front. To any outsider, it was just debris, but to the men of Harker's unit, it was hope, a secret weapon, a last resort.
And Harker knew the truth. He hadn't built that flamethrower for glory. He built it because he knew one day the battlefield would become desperate enough that even the officers would beg him to use it. And he was right. That day would come far sooner than anyone expected.
The hammer comes down. In war, innovation saves lives, but military hierarchy despises surprises. The moment the officers discovered Harker's improvised flamethrower, the reaction was immediate, severe, and absolute. They didn't see a life-saving invention. They saw a threat to order, a violation of protocol, a scandal waiting to happen. To them, Harker's weapon represented everything the British Army feared: an uncontrolled idea, a soldier thinking for himself, a tool not born from the chain of command. In other words, unacceptable. The officers marched Harker into a command tent darkened by midday clouds. A major sat behind a table, hands folded. "Major Harker, explain this contraption." Harker stayed calm. He explained the truth. It was meant to clear bunkers. It could save lives. The unit needed something with firepower beyond grenades and piats. He had tested it safely. But the officers cut him off. "You are not an engineer. You are not an armorer. And you are not authorized to build weapons of your own. What you created is unstable, unsanctioned, and could explode on your back. And if it kills you, we deal with paperwork. If it kills another soldier, we face a court-martial." Their message was clear. Innovation does not matter if it bypasses the system. Official reasons for the ban. The officers listed their reasons point by point. 1. Lack of safety controls. A homemade fuel system could rupture or ignite prematurely. 2. No official testing. The Army had no idea how the weapon would behave under combat stress. 3. Chain of command violation. Allowing a private to invent weapons set a dangerous precedent. 4. Fear of soldier copycats. If one improvised flamethrower was tolerated, others might try reckless experiments. 5. Liability. If someone died, high command would be held responsible. These reasons were technically correct, but ethically hollow. Because the officers were not the ones being pinned down by bunkers every week. They weren't sprinting across open fields with MG-42s screaming overhead. They weren't dragging dying friends back to trenches. Harker was. And so were the men standing silently behind him.
Soldiers react. When Harker returned to the workshop, the soldiers gathered around him. Some were furious. "They banned it? After what we've seen out there?" Others were defiant. "We need this thing more than they need their bloody rules." One man said quietly, "If a bunker takes half our unit again, will the officers come clear it? No? Then we need Harker's fire." What shocked Harker was the solidarity. These men weren't mechanics, not inventors, not engineers. They were riflemen, mortarmen, scouts. But they believed in the weapon. They believed in him. Even the quietest soldier in the unit, a man named Lewis, stepped forward and said, "If they won't approve it, we'll approve it ourselves." The officer's last warning. 2 days later, a final order arrived. The flamethrower is banned. No further development. No testing. No use in combat. The officers demanded the weapon be dismantled and destroyed. They even threatened reassignment, loss of rank, and confinement for disobedience. But Harker could not forget the men dying outside the wire. He could not forget the bunkers cutting down squads.
He could not forget the sound of the MG-42 that haunted his sleep. Destroy his creation? Destroy the one weapon that could crack a bunker open like an egg? Not a chance. Instead, he nodded politely, saluted, and began planning to hide it. Hiding the flamethrower. That night, under lantern light, the men acted. They lifted crates, moved sandbags, pulled apart a false wall in the barn. Behind it, they created a secret alcove. A soldier whispered, "The officers won't come in here. They think this place is full of rats." They slid the flamethrower into the hollow space, covered it with tarps, stacked boxes in front. By dawn, it was invisible, hidden, protected, waiting.
The day the earth shook. War rarely announces itself, but on one cold morning in 1944, the Germans did. At dawn, a thunderous roar rolled across the fields, the unmistakable sound of a coordinated German counterattack. Mortars shrieked overhead, artillery pounded the earth, machine guns, MG-42s, opened up from hidden fortifications like 1,000 tearing saws. A British company, under strength, exhausted, low on ammunition, found itself caught in a storm designed to annihilate them. And at the center of this disaster, 5 German bunkers stood like concrete giants, unmoving, untouchable, deadly. They would become the tombstones of the British line, unless someone did the impossible. The attack began before anyone even reached for breakfast. A deafening thoom shattered the morning quiet, then another, and another. Shells fell like rain, mud blasted into the air, shrapnel screamed past helmets, trenches collapsed in clouds of dirt and smoke, men scrambled for cover, radios crackled with panic. Harker dove behind a shattered wall as debris slammed into the ground beside him. Private Lewis, "It's an entire company! They're pushing hard!" Corporal Haynes, "They're trying to break through us! Hold the line!" But it wasn't the infantry assault that terrified them. It was what came next. The 5 bunkers awaken. As the bombardment eased, a new sound echoed across the valley. Brrrr! The sound of 5 MG-42s opening fire. From 5 bunkers, with interlocking arcs of fire, they stitched the ground with lines of bullets so dense the air itself seemed carved apart. British soldiers who attempted to move even a few inches were...
The commanders panic. Inside a makeshift command dugout, officers huddled around a flickering radio. Reports were grim. German infantry advancing. British right flank collapsing. Machine gun nests wiping out entire squads. Anti-tank guns failing to get line of sight. No reinforcements available. The captain slammed his fist on the table. "Captain, we can't withdraw. If we fall back, the entire brigade line collapses." "Lieutenant, then how do we silence the bunkers?" No one answered. They had nothing. No official flamethrowers. No armor nearby. No heavy artillery. The captain looked up, eyes hollow. "We're out of options." Soldiers remember the hidden weapon. Pinned in the mud, bullets cutting the ground around them, Lewis turned to Harker. "Lewis." "Harker. The thing you built. Could it hit a bunker at that range?" Harker didn't answer at first. He stared at the smoking hill where the 5 bunkers sat. He knew. The weapon wasn't perfect. It could malfunction. It could blow up in his hands. It might kill him instantly. But he also knew something else. If no one acted, everyone on that line would die. Slowly, he nodded. "Harker. Yes. it can. Lewis swallowed hard. Then, maybe, today's the day. Harker's heart pounded. Sweat dripped from his helmet onto the dirt. And then, another scream from the trench. Another burst of MG-42 fire. Another friend gone. That was the breaking point. The bunkers closed in. Through the smoke, German infantry advanced behind the bunker fire. Grenades exploded along the British line. Snipers picked off any soldier who dared move their head an inch too high. Mortar shells crashed into trenches. The British were moments from collapse. Corporal Haynes. "We can't hold! We can't—" A shell exploded beside him. The trench wall caved in. Men screamed, mud buried weapons. Blood mixed with rainwater running through the trench floors. It was over. Unless something changed. Now. Harker makes his decision. Harker crawled toward Lewis. "Get me to the barn." "You're serious. You're actually going to use it. If we don't, no one leaves this field alive." "Then, all right. Let's go get your monster." The decision was made. The British Army had banned the flamethrower. But the battlefield overruled them. The next chapter would become legend. The chapter where one man lit a fire that would burn through 5 German bunkers and change the battle forever.
The flames that changed the war. Smoke, silence, and a man with an empty tank. When the flames finally died, the battlefield fell silent. Smoke drifted through the shattered remains of 5 German bunkers. Concrete still glowed a faint red from the heat. The air tasted of ash and victory. And standing among it all, alone, exhausted, almost ghost-like, was Private William Harker. His improvised flamethrower was empty, his uniform singed, his body shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline. But the German advance had stopped. The bunkers were silent, and the British line still stood. For the first time in hours, the battlefield belonged to them. Slowly, British soldiers rose from the mud. Men who had been pinned down, convinced they were moments from death, now looked around in disbelief. One whispered, "He did it." Another said, "Bloody hell, he actually did it." Some laughed. Some cried. Some simply stared, unable to comprehend how one man could do what artillery, air support, and doctrine could not. Corporal Haynes placed a hand on Harker's shoulder. "Haynes, Private, you just saved the entire company." Harker didn't reply. He didn't have the strength left to speak. He simply nodded and collapsed to his knees, drained but alive. The officers' reaction. When the officers arrived, they expected disaster. Instead, they found 5 destroyed German bunkers, dozens of abandoned weapons, halted infantry advance, a saved front line, and one exhausted private leaning on a weapon they had banned. The captain's expression told the entire story. Shock, relief, doubt, and a hint of respect. He approached the flamethrower carefully, examining the scorched metal. "This is the device we forbade. Sir, with respect, if he hadn't built it, we'd all be dead."
The captain said nothing for a long time. Then he turned to Harker. "Private Harker, your actions were unauthorized, unorthodox, and against direct orders." A pause. A deep breath. Captain quietly. "But you saved more lives today than any official weapon could have. And for that, the ban is lifted." The officer all exhaled. Even the major nodded. The British Army had just admitted what every soldier already knew. Innovation had saved them. Fire had saved them. Harker had saved them.
Within days, the flamethrower was removed from its hiding place, not to be hidden again, but to be studied. Engineers examined every piece: the pump system, the wiring, the fuel tanks, the nozzle design, Harker's improvised ignition. One engineer muttered, "This is crude, but brilliant." The officers ordered, "Write a report, document everything. We will replicate it." Soon, other units requested demonstrations. Soldiers crowded around as Harker operated the weapon, flame roaring through the morning mist. For many, it was the first time they felt a sense of power against the bunkers that had terrorized them for months. The improvised flamethrower wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol, a message that ingenuity, even from a private in the mud, could turn the tide of battle. Weeks later, after the front stabilized, Harker was summoned to a field ceremony. His uniform was cleaned, his boots polished, but his hands still carried the burns and scars from that day. The entire company stood at attention. The captain pinned a ribbon to his chest. "Captain, for extraordinary bravery under fire, for saving the lives of your comrades, for defying death and sometimes orders in the name of duty." He stepped back. "Captain, Private William Harker, you are hereby commended." The soldiers erupted into applause. Some clapped, some cheered, some simply nodded. The silent salute of men who understood sacrifice. Harker didn't smile. He didn't bask in glory. He just whispered, "I did what had to be done." After the war, many stories were lost, many heroes forgotten, many names buried in files and fading ink, but not Harker's. Among the men who served with him, his story became legend. The man who defied the rules, built a weapon from nothing, charged into fire, cleared 5 bunkers alone, and saved an entire front line. Even decades later, veterans spoke of him with awe. He wasn't fearless, he was just determined not to die uselessly. Another said, "When everyone else said impossible, Harker said, 'Give me a few hours and some scrap metal.'" And perhaps the greatest praise of all came from a hardened sergeant who fought in 3 campaigns. The army banned his weapon, but the enemy couldn't.
Final narration. War is not won by perfect machines. It is not won by polished officers in clean uniforms. It is not won by rulebooks or manuals. War is won by men like Private Harker. Men who see their friends dying and refuse to accept it. Men who break rules to save lives. Men who turn fear into fire and fire into victory. The British Army banned his flamethrower, but when the world was collapsing, when 5 German bunkers threatened to erase the entire company, they depended on the very thing they tried to destroy. Because sometimes the weapon that saves you is the one no one believed in. And sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who build their own destiny from nothing but courage, scrap metal, and the will to survive. Fade to black. Title: The Flamethrower Man, the Soldier Who Changed the Battlefield.